Scott, what's this sound?
Well, that sounds a little like the white noise I play when I sleep at night, but I think it's a wave.
Is it a blue wave?
I can't quite make out the color, but yes, I bet it's a blue wave about to crash down on the Republican Party.
Now, Scott, what's this noise?
That sounds like a construction site, you know. I'm not sure what they're building, but it sounds kind of like a wall.
Build the wall. Build the wall.
It might be a red wall. So what happens when a blue wave crashes into a red wall? Who wins? That's what we wanted to find out in last night's election, the two special elections. Did we figure it out?
Well, I say the wave crashes into the wall and moisture floats up into the air. And what we get is purple rain, purple rain.
Whoa, man, I didn't know you had such a great Minneapolis voice there.
Purple rain, purple rain.
I thought you were more Motown Detroit guy.
I love Prince, man.
What people in politics mean when they say purple is that it's the combination of colors. You should know this. You're a cartoonist. Can you explain this to us, Phil? You know colors better than I do. There's red and there's blue, and when you mix them,
you get purple.
Okay, so I still think, even though Wisconsin has been red in terms of Republican controlled now for dang near 8 years, I still think we tend to be a purple state. In other words, a state that in some elections we will go for Democrats who are blue because of the electoral map. People think of them as blue. Or in other years, we'll go red with the Republicans. On the electoral presidential map, we think of red as the Republican color. I still think Wisconsin is one of these states that could go either way, even though we haven't had Democrats running everything for nearly a decade here.
Well, that's just because you're a moderate person. If you're a Republican, you talk all the time about how I can win in a blue state like Wisconsin, or if you're a Democrat, you say I can win in a red state like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And really, we're somewhere in the middle.
Well, today on Center Stage, the Wisconsin State Journal's political podcast from the sensible center of Wisconsin politics, we're going to talk about this week's two special elections and how they reinforce that Wisconsin is purple, not red or blue. I'm Scott Milfred, the editorial page editor with the Wisconsin State Journal.
And I'm Phil Hands. I'm the political cartoonist at the Wisconsin State Journal.
And we are half of the Wisconsin State Journal editorial board.
The better looking half.
Big news, at least the headlines across the state, not just in our paper or on our website, but other papers, on the TV. Split decision. The Republicans win one election. The Democrats win the other special election. It's the blue wave versus the red wall, and who will win this fall? But I see the whole thing differently, which is I see the results of last night's election, and we're recording this on Wednesday, as a purple sweep.
A purple sweep.
Yeah. Both the moderates won in the 42nd Assembly District, in my view, north of Dane County, and in the 1st Senate District. To me, the two people that were running the most as moderates won, and that was consistent and good. I don't necessarily view it as just this paradigm of right versus left, red versus blue.
You mean right versus wrong?
In the 1st Senate District, Caleb Frostman was the Democrat running against Andre Jacques,
who is a sitting assemblyman right now,
running for the Senate seat in northeastern Wisconsin, 1st Senate seat. Andre Jacques is one of the highest profile social right-wingers
he seems to have a new bill restricting abortion every week in the assembly that he releases.
Yeah, and he's one of those kind of troublemakers, I guess you could say, for Republicans in the Senate Republican caucus who doesn't think they're conservative enough. Fitzgerald and his crew, Scott Fitzgerald. And he's one of the guys that would like to shut down some of the research at the University of Wisconsin, where they're trying to do this biomedical research.
He's pretty much a radical Republican. When you talk about radical Republicans, he is kind of the poster child for that.
I think he is, and he was running against Caleb Frostman, who, if you go to his webpage, You see him out, I presume, somewhere in Door County in this field, and he's wearing orange hunting outfit, and he's got a shotgun over his shoulder, hunting. I mean, he was the head of the Economic Development Corporation in...
He's sort of a Chamber of Commerce Democrat.
Yeah, and he was a real estate guy. He does talk about a lot of the Democratic issues, like he wants to bring more support for public education. He wants more people to have affordable health care. He's talking some of the Democratic issues. But he's not by any means a Bernie Sanders progressive.
No, he is not. I'm not even sure he would call himself a progressive. And he wouldn't call himself a socialist either.
Yeah, which moves us to the 42nd Assembly District, which is north of Madison. It ducks into Dane County a little bit. It's mostly a Columbia County seat, and then parts of the counties that surround Columbia County north.
But there are some kind of Madison bedroom communities in this district.
That is very true. Even in Columbia County, you get into some bedroom communities where people are commuting into Madison, like the Democratic candidate there, Ann Groves Lloyd.
Who works at UW-Madison.
She did until like a week or two ago when she retired. The Republican is John Plummer.
Runs a karate studio in Lodi.
And he also is kind of a community booster guy up there. Actually, interesting, you pointed this out. He grew up in Madison, but moved out to the smaller city out there.
Ann Groves Lloyd talks about how she was raised on the family farm in Lodi, but she spent her entire working career in Madison. So,
at least most of it. In any case, John Plummer won the special election last night, defeating the Democrat Ann Groves Lloyd. Plummer, he called himself a moderate. If you go to his website, he's reading a book, presumably to his grandchildren, and he's talking about we need to fund public education, we need common sense in the legislature, we need more civility and working across the aisle. Frostman did some of that.
So Plummer was not a radical Republican the same way that Andre Jacques was.
Not at all, and at least certainly not in the way he campaigned. We endorsed him. We didn't.
We met with these two candidates in the 42nd district.
That's right, because they're more in south central Wisconsin. We did not endorse in the 1st district, which is quite a ways from here. But we did endorse John Plummer, and we did view him as more of the moderate. So let's talk about Ann Groves Lloyd. We thought she was a great person. We did not think she was as close to the center, I guess, as Plummer.
No, she didn't talk in her endorsement meeting. She didn't talk a lot about wanting to work with the other party or finding common sense solutions. She talked about the immorality of conservative values in some ways. Mm-hmm. And she just seemed like she wasn't going to be the type of candidate who was going to bridge the gap and work from the sensible center where we are. And I think John Plummer showed a real interest in bipartisanship and trying to find common sense solutions to real problems. And I think the left, I think the Democrats picked her, and she is more in that vein of the Bernie Sanders progressive far left wing of the party than some candidates who've run in this seat in the past.
Yeah, for example, we endorsed in the past couple elections the Democrat who was running against then incumbent Republican Keith Ripp.
Yeah.
George Ferriter. He was a very moderate Democrat who was running in that seat. Now, he didn't win.
No.
But he also didn't run in a year when Democrats are energized.
Yeah, he wasn't part of a blue wave.
And John Plummer told us twice, I asked him twice in the endorsement meeting just to make sure, he said he supports nonpartisan redistricting.
One of our big issues.
The other thing that came up was some of the attacks that both sides were having on either candidates. There, of course, are outside groups with ads. Some of the candidates run ads themselves. But in one ad, I think it was by the Republican Party, not specifically Plummer, they dinged Ann Groves Lloyd. They labeled her a socialist. And they went back to lots of tweets that she had done on Twitter in which she was doing some pretty fiery tweets against the right wing from the left wing. And they used that to tag her as a socialist. She brought it up at our meeting, so we said to her, "Are you a socialist?" And she kind of hemmed and hawed on that.
She did not say, "No, I'm not a socialist."
Yeah. Now, she didn't say, "Yes, I am." But she did not say, "No, I am not."
Which is interesting because Mark Pocan, who is one of the most liberal guys in the Congress, he's told us many times, "I'm not a socialist, I'm a capitalist."
Yeah. But somehow, for some reason, she couldn't quite go there, probably because she didn't want to diffuse in any way the energy that the progressives have, particularly in and around Madison.
But she's not running in Madison. She's running in Lodi.
Yeah. Where there are bedroom communities, but it's a more rural district. In fact, it was carved out and turned into a very rural district by the Republicans so that Keith Ripp could have the seat as long as he wanted.
Yeah.
But why don't we talk just about the results?
So in the 47th Assembly District, there were about 10,500 votes total, and John Plummer won with 53% of the vote, and Ann Groves Lloyd got about 45% of the vote.
Okay. And that wasn't that different of a percentage from what Scott Walker won by. Granted, this is a lot fewer voters, though.
Yeah, this is a much smaller. So what's interesting about this race was that I'm going to look back at the 2014 numbers because that was the last time they were both running in sort of an off-year election. Because presidential elections, we always get more votes. But so there were just over 10,000 votes in this special election. Back in 2014, this district had 25,000 votes. So it's about 42% of the turnout that they had, 4 years ago. And back then, Keith Ripp won by a larger margin. He won 58 to 42%. So Ann Groves Lloyd has narrowed the margin since 2014, but she didn't flip the seat.
Yeah.
Which I think Democrats saw this as a very flippable seat.
And as you alluded to, it sounds like their strategy was, let's go with energy over moderation. Let's not find a moderate Democrat to run as a moderate Democrat, hoping to pick off more of the swing voters and independents. Let's run somebody as a Democrat that both the sort of mainline Democrats and the progressives can rally around because they're energized against Trump and Walker, and let's boost turnout.
Well, yeah, I think the idea that Democrats have is that there are all these people who align with Democrats who just don't vote in elections because they're not inspired or energized, and they want to find somebody who's going to inspire that group of voters who just don't choose not to vote. Now, I don't know if this is the right district for that sort of candidate.
When you talk about a wave election, you're talking about generally how most elections tend to going to go. But that doesn't mean that every member of the party that's part of that wave is going to win. That candidates still matter, districts still matter. Some candidates in districts are very, very different from other ones. So not everything is going to work in every race.
See, I want to say I think the Democratic Party made a mistake with this candidate. I think this was a flippable seat, and I think if they'd run somebody like George Ferriter again, who was a very moderate Democrat, he could have won this seat in this low turnout election year. We should also say that this really isn't, I mean, these people aren't actually going to serve any time in the Assembly or the Senate. They're going to basically hold this office until the election in November.
Yeah.
And they're not going to do anything in that period of time.
Probably
There's nothing to do. There's no assembly or there's no sessions going to be held.
No, but there's constituent services. You also get to say you are their representative. I mean, incumbency does bring a certain level of legitimacy, I think.
Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp.
But you are, but you're not part of the swamp if you've only been in there a few days. The main event here is this fall. And as you said, there's going to be more people voting this fall. A lot could change between now and this fall in terms of what Donald Trump says, what he doesn't say, what he changes, what he says, how many times. There's a lot of things that could happen between now and this fall, and there's a lot more voters who are going to vote this fall. So all of the candidates who ran last night in the election are running again this fall, I believe.
We're all having there's going to be a rematch in the fall.
Yeah, so they could change, but I think what you saw nationally were a lot of Democrats feeding on this impressive win by Frostman up in the 1st Senate District, where that seat hasn't been Republican in decades.
You know what's interesting about
and where Trump won by a huge amount.
Yeah. What's interesting about that district, too, is they actually had a lower turnout than the 42nd did in terms of percentage of what they usually have. So that you could argue that district was less energized than the 42nd was.
Except that Door County, where Frostman's from, and which has tended to swing some elections that went for Barack Obama, for example, and then it went for Trump, Door County came out big. And he's from Door County, Sturgeon Bay. So at least in Door County, he got a big boost there.
Yeah. And maybe the rest of the counties in the district weren't energized to turn out.
Yeah. And so he's got to maintain that.
But I don't think, Door County is not I don't think of it as a conservative place. I think of it as
there's a lot of money and a lot of people who are coming there who might be conservative to hang out to some degree. But then there's a lot of nature and a lot of...
Well, money is, I think we still live in this, where we still sometimes think of money and Republicans go together, but I think more and more the places where the battlegrounds are taking place this year in this 2018 election are going to be these wealthy suburban districts where these people just don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't see Trump playing well in Door County.
The point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of people who visit Door County who don't vote there. So nationally, the Democrats are picking up on this race, and they're saying, see, Trump won big in this Wisconsin Senate seat, and now a Democrat just won there for the first time in a decade. It fits the same pattern as the 10th Senate district earlier this year, where a Democrat won in Wisconsin, in western Wisconsin, for the first time in a long time, and she was running as a moderate too, and it feeds this blue wave narrative that the Democrats hope continues into the fall. Obviously, Robin Vos, the Speaker of the Assembly, was very excited that John Plummer won in the Assembly 42nd District, and what he tweeted was #BlueTrickle. He's saying the red wall is coming up to help stop the blow of that blue wave, and the Plummer win in the 42nd District is evidence of that. I still think these two races, I still don't see them as opposites. I see them as the same thing, of voters picking a more common sense, moderate candidate. But that's how the two parties are framing this. They're going to both latch on to the one race that helps them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think if you look nationally, the Democrats that have won, that have sort of led to this blue wave, they're not the Bernie Sanders Democrats that are winning these elections. These are the more pragmatic, moderate Democrats. Especially was it Lamb in Pennsylvania who won that congressional seat?
Yeah.
That in a district that Trump had won by 20-some points. He was a very moderate candidate. And I think that might be, as much as the left wants to get inspired about we need to fire up the base, the districts, where they're going to win is with very moderate, pragmatic candidates in districts that are currently run by Republicans.
Yeah, and that seems to be the argument is, do you go with energy of the left and run somebody further left in the Bernie camp, or do you go with moderation and try to pick off more of the Trump voters who swung away from Obama to Trump?
And I think maybe there might be different calculuses for whether it's a statewide election or if it's a local district election. On the Democratic side, in the case of the governor's race, there are votes in both Dane County and Milwaukee County that you want to turn out. And maybe going to the left helps you with those cases. And you only lose so many votes on the margins in the middle of some of the more outstate areas. But, when you're running a candidate in Columbia County, basically, and she's a super lefty who wants to fire up the base, there isn't a big base out there that needs to be fired up. There's not a bunch of voters sitting on their hands who aren't voting in most elections. But I think there are some places, like maybe in Milwaukee, or maybe there's some people in Madison.
Certainly in Madison.
Who say, well, I'm not inspired by these moderate Democratic candidates. Yeah. I'm not going to go vote for this person. She's just like, or he or she is just like a Republican. I don't need to go vote for that person. But maybe if a Bernie comes around, now we're talking about real change, and I'll go to the polls and vote for that person. I don't think there are very many people with that perspective outside of Dane County or Milwaukee County.
And it might be a younger perspective. The young people seem to get really fired up about Bernie Sanders.
And this is an issue we've talked about, is that the young people are fleeing the rural parts of the state.
They also don't vote as often in midterm elections, which is coming up this fall.
Yeah.
Find and follow our podcast, Center Stage with Milfred and Hands, on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud.